we are back, and the next one is actually mine. So the IT asset portfolio management in enterprise context. Basically, we'll be broadening up the perspective, looking a little bit further. We usually mention asset management. Now we'll be going into portfolio management sense. So how all of that, all of these elements, all of these areas, data models, information, how this works together. And first, we'll start a little bit about the architecture of IT assets in the company itself, so where they are placed in all of that picture of describing the enterprise. The second one, what is that asset portfolio management? So why it's worth doing, how to do that, what it means. There are a lot of intersections with the asset management. The main difference actually is the perspective, the broader perspective. And in the end, a few examples of where to start, something, tangible that you can get to. So first and foremost, an interesting part in many discussions, always a question, the simple question of what is an asset or what is a service and stuff like that, poses actually a lot of discussions because everyone has their own definition, but the asset is a server or no, the people are the assets or not, people are not the assets because these are persons and not things. So the official definition is that's a resource with economic value, but in the end, a useful or valuable thing or person, anything basically that is in the company, in the enterprise, is an asset. It can be a person, it can be a process, it's a knowledge, it's a server, it's a license, all of that stuff, warehouses, planes or ships, trucks, factories, all of that are assets, because otherwise, why would we need them, right? And we all need to look into the full picture of that. So if we are saying, okay, but I'm only focusing on servers, it doesn't mean that it does not influence processes or people or actually these warehouses or factories. So where is it all placed? So when we talk about the IT assets, because that's what we are mainly discussing here, how does it place in all of that big picture of the enterprise? This is, of course, a very high-level, simplified view, but it will enable us to continue, let's say, the idea, the discussion. So at the top, we have the business data objects. I will be referring to data objects because everywhere where we describe things in our world, it's some kind of an object that we identify. Even if we put something on paper like regulation or policy, it has some relations, it has some attributes and stuff like that. If you put it into the data model, the database model, that's basically an object that you can manage. So how the business is structured, or all the organizational data objects. Then the business data objects, how the business is executed. Because one thing is how the legal entities are out there, but then a totally different question, how you are doing stuff. In between is the data objects layer. So all the IT assets, that's the CMDB, AMDB, whatever you name it. And below, as always, it is mentioned because the money talks, money drives many of the discussions, is okay, our agreement data objects, so how we actually acquire all these assets. These can also be our consultants, our employees, whatever, services, and the cost data objects. So you actually, how you organize it to connect it further. Why these three layers are important? Because as the scale grows, the complexity of all that grows. If you have a company of 10 people, probably very easy is to you to say, yes, my company is X. What we are doing, we are selling cups. Our IT is websites and Gmail. And then our agreement is for the website and Gmail, right? So what is there to allocate? But then if you go into the scale like Volvo described, or DSV, or Orange, or someone, it's basically too big of a data model for a human mind to comprehend. You will not comprehend 500 legal entities, 20,000 servers, 70,000 people, relations between them, and then the business strategies and the setup across the world and stuff like that. So you need to have some kind of a system solutions. To put a little bit more to that, of course, it's not exhaustive, but what is hidden inside of that areas and what is the main relations between them? In the organizational data objects, as mentioned, it can be organizational units, company codes, so the legal entities, or even deeper structures, locations, employees who own business data objects. They own the business goals, the capabilities, the processes, or the services that we actually offer to the market. Because we often discuss that actually we are not an IT business, many of us. We are business within the organization itself. So for example, you have a global IT structures who serve something to your business in the company, and then this business is serving to your clients out there. And the IT data objects, the IT landscape, as usually we call it, then all of these software services, databases, digital products, whatever describes all the elements of IT, then it is being consumed by the organization, and then it supports the business itself. Unless you are selling IT, you are not the business. You operate like a business internally, but you are not the business itself. And in order to provide the transparency and the value and explain what are the reasons behind such a structure or such a cost, you actually need to know, okay, from where this is coming. So the agreements, contracts, vendors, invoices, they contain all of that. We have purchased it usually, right? It's not something we have produced, of course. It can be if there is self-developed, but still somewhere in the end there is a connection to the pricing. And these agreement objects, they set a price on the cost data objects. What you can see here are actually the cost pools from the TBM taxonomy, which then help to allocate the cost further, because you can only imagine if someone sitting in a business, I don't know, a sales guy, he doesn't give a flying F about how whatever is happening below in IT and how much it should cost, whatever, right? He just wants to have his CRM cheap. Doesn't care, right? And pay only for what he is using. So this is setting the scene itself, how about the all relations and what we are talking about. Why it's so important to actually look in a broader perspective, because if you are touching one of them, like the server, for example, you can actually touch the lower layer and the upper layer. And it doesn't mean that you are only touching, okay, how many employees now can be hired because you have increased cost, but actually how we fulfill the business service, which is, in the end, earning us money. So the IT asset portfolio management, the approach itself, this broader perspective. And we don't have to be strict. This is just to spark an idea, let's say, because as we have heard along the way, like from David or Damian, the asset management can also be very proactive, right, and looking forward. But just to give a little bit of differentiation, so about the scope, usually the asset management, going around the market, talking with the companies, talking with people, it's a focus of, okay, they gave me something to manage, and I will just do it, right? So they said, manage licenses. Okay, I will be doing management of licenses. I won't be asking questions why, where we are using it. I will be doing efficient negotiations, let's say. I will present what we have, and whoever wants to deal with that, let's do it. While from the portfolio management, it's something like David was presenting about the application portfolio management. We are actually going out to the business, trying to understand what they are doing, why they are doing it. So maybe we won't be the leaders of the strategy development, but we will be working with them to actually make the right investments. Not just go out and buy whatever, or implement whatever, or build whatever, but actually something that brings value to these business elements, right? Something that we will never perfect, we will never be great, because, well, we are good in IT, in legal, in compliance, stuff like that, but we are not the one man who actually figures out how the jet is built, or the, I don't know, a bus, right? Then the involvement itself. As I observed, the asset management is usually involved in the middle and end of life cycle. It's very hard for the asset management to be part of the demand management. So evaluating the process of evaluating the business needs, the business requirements, which not only focus on the functional part, but also on the non-functional part, which might seem pretty obvious, but then if you will have contradictory requirements, something that cannot be fulfilled on a technical level or cannot be fulfilled with our organization, then the client has no idea. The business guy is coming in saying, I want to have a system which will not have any downtime at all for free. And if someone says, yes, it's possible, then that's what he will get on paper, right? Then the perspective itself, if you put it into the organization usually has the strategic, tactical, operational, and you can divide it anywhere on any level, usually into these three. Then the asset management stays on the tactical, operational part. So these, okay, we have implemented already something, we are closing something, we are managing something. The portfolio management, being part of the full life cycle process, then has also the option to be strategic partner. That's one of the topics we'll be discussing later during the sessions, discussion panels, where how to actually make, for example, the item partner upstairs to the C-level, to the big guys who discuss, because it's often a problem, right? But we are doing a great job, we're doing great deals, we are managing efficiently and stuff like that, and still these people don't want to work with us because it's like, whatever we have decided, they just do. And then the responsibilities. So already what was mentioned above, and it is repeated for a reason, that the scope and the responsibilities, that's something that is being decided together. And the responsibilities, what Damian was also mentioning earlier, if something is out there and it's not managed, and you want to take the initiative, you can just take it, right? And then, of course, it's a little bit more on you, but then you also, like they say in the army, as long as you have the initiative, then your enemy does not have it. So you decide first. So why actually doing that? I only briefly touched upon it, the first point especially. So first working with why instead of what. And this is extremely important in terms of, for example, mentioning the business capabilities. Earlier, you will also see it later how it's being used. Because first we start what, or exactly why do you need it? What you want to solve first and foremost. Instead of just coming in and saying, what do you want to buy? Because how on earth the guys could know what they want to buy? They just say, I need XYZ. You are the specialist out there, probably, right? I can tell you, even organizing this event, I can tell you, the gentlemen working on the right, they actually explained a lot of stuff that I didn't know as a client, right? They said, but if you want to solve that, you need XYZ. That's actually this part of why, what do you want to solve? Then understanding the scope. Usually the asset management works horizontally. So if we are talking about the licensing, then it's the licensing. We do not ask questions about the scalability or the continuity, how does it work with different parts of the company, the technology, the strategy. Someone is building a new platform, right, in the company saying, a big change to the infrastructure. And with the other hand, we are signing an agreement for the next 5 years for the old technology. So it's not adding up. Then identifying the dependencies. And this is a huge topic of how the different elements interact with each other. What are the dependencies? What is the value of these dependencies? What is the risk behind them? Especially in ever-changing, the big environments, it is a growing need in that terms that you can push something here and something on the other continent pops up. As an example, we were doing screen testing during one of the M&As. We killed a server in Asia. And people in warehouse in South America couldn't get in for 2 days. And no one knew why. No one had the documentation, no one could tell us. But after 2 days of routing tickets through service desk, it finally got to us that, oh yes, this server is actually responsible for that site for some reason. So it's also looking into dependencies, but on different levels, because you can start from the very basic ones, which is very complex as well. The network, what is connected with what in the environment. But then you have the next layers, which systems, which services, which capabilities, which strategies, because then if you actually are interacting with something at the top, then it influences everything at the bottom as well, and the other way around as well. And the last but not least, that's, as I see, the way of actually becoming the part of the strategic table. It will not imply you a ticket to decide, it will not give you a mandate, but it can make you a partner. Because, as also mentioned earlier during the presentations, that need where someone comes in from the C-level and says, okay, we have an issue with Huawei, so where is all the Huawei? What is the impact on our business? If you can answer that questions, oh yes, you will be the guy to come to eventually. And this was actually also the reasons, as we've been working also in DSV, for example, for creation of some of the disciplines, because someone said it can never happen again, right? Because otherwise we will lose business and stuff like that. So how to start working with it, how to get there, because it's mainly about the mindset, how you look at things, that you actually ask the question one step further. First, what you need to have in mind is that always there is a playfield, limited by things that you won't have influence on. That's your play rules. Starting from the top, the strategic limitations. If a company is producing buses, probably they will not be growing oranges, right? So that's one of the simple limitations in the very beginning. If someone comes in and says, I want a system to manage planting of oranges, everyone will just say, yeah, it doesn't make sense. No, because we are producing buses. Then the bottom one, the legal limitations. Well, in 99.99999% cases, all of us work in the very legal environments. So no one will do something illegal, right? So if something is against the law, of course, there can be places where we can discuss, like Dorota mentioned, where is your limit of responsibility or your viability for something. But still, legal part is also non-discussable. If someone wants to retain data after the period allowed by the legal, then okay, what you face court, for example, right, at the end. Are you ready for that risk? Probably not. Then the technical limitations, something which is very hard to grasp, because that's where actually the demand management comes in. You need to have on the other side someone who can describe what they want, their requirements, and on the other hand, someone who can listen. So not impose what they know, but what actually you need to solve and how and can I help with that. And on the last part of that playground is the economical limitations. We always discuss, okay, let's reduce cost, let's build something, but then if you don't have resources, so it can be time, people, or money, simply put, then this is also something that is carving out all the possibilities that you have. And then going from the top, a few elements is here mentioned. So we have the business capabilities and service portfolios. That's the part which actually shapes or is the closest one to the strategy part, because the capabilities describe what we do and what are the requirements towards the IT organization, both the functional ones and non-functional ones. The service portfolios, this is something usually not very well connected, but the service portfolios, they say how the IT organization is actually shaped. Because someone can say, yes, we want to build global structures, but then if you have 2,000 local sites, then it's impossible to not have local IT structures. Because what? Someone always from the global headquarters will be flying in, solving the incidents? Not gonna happen, right? But this also helps you then to understand, okay, what is the next layer of limitations, the strategic part. the tactical one, which is where we most often probably work. So the products. Products of any kind. It can be software, it can be hardware, it can be things that you buy on the market. Because the moment you buy the product, you have made some tactical decision that you will be connecting the operations, the processes, the people, whatever is happening in your company to some kind of a solution you have chosen. This is a usually middle to long-term commitment. And then the services, so what you are providing as IT organization, what you want to provide, because rarely the service is simply, we will support a system. It actually entails, we need people to support that system, or we need people who are doing stuff on site. And the last but not least is the operational part. So what exactly are we doing? And this is something that usually you will find on the implementations layer. So where we have installed something, that's the operational use. That's also the system that we have built, where we used the hardware. And the offerings, because the services, even though you might say, okay, we'll be supporting our users worldwide when it comes to installing laptops, let's say, then you can say, you know what, but if you want 20 laptops at the same time, then we want to do it within the promised 24 hours. We actually need to plan for that 2 weeks in advance, and then you will have it within the agreed period. And this again might sound obvious because, okay, but if I'm ordering 100 laptops, obvious that they need to plan it. Yes, but not everyone knows it, right? It's like if you work in 10,000 people organization, you have no clue what the 9,999 is doing, and these people don't know what you are doing. So if you promise that you will deliver something in 2 hours, they will not be thinking into, but if I multiply it by 100, probably not doable, right? So this is how you start to shape the perspectives. And now the funny part comes in, because we take the software system focus. I really like that one because the software is the most popular one. And hardware can be very tricky, especially if you introduce this IoT, OT, and stuff like that, which can be obvious for the business users on some level. But then even for IT now, it's not really defined. Where is the boundary between IT and OT? Because it's very technical usually. It starts, you know, going deeper into what is the frequency you are working on. And then even the network guys and OT guys cannot, you know, make an agreement. So this is only a portion of a full data model of the organization, right? We just went on a very high level, and now we just took a portion looking at, okay, let's look how the software is being implemented and how it's being used. If we would put here a full map of everything, it would be huge. It would be hundreds of relations, hundreds of elements. Like Damian was mentioning in Volvo, they have over 170 classes of CIs alone, right? There is not 170, and these are the CIs alone. It's not added on top what is there. So, what actually you find here? What these relations mean? So we can start building this perspective. It's a little bit like an exercise right now. Going from the top, the business capability. This will be our strategic start. So where we capture the requirements, what the business needs, right? And by what it is provided. We have chosen a software perspective. So first and foremost, we have a software product. And then, of course, if it's not some standalone stuff, because you need the IT support, then you have something behind it. You have services. And those services can be business or technical. The business ones, they focus on what the end users can get from you directly, like an access. The technical service is something they don't see, but they get in the agreement in between, right? So all the beautiful SLAs, OLAs, if someone screams, then it's a problem. Otherwise, no one notices even. So, what we do then? You can see that the business services and technical services, they are referring to service portfolio. But as you can see, there is no provided by. There is no strict relation. This is actually the separation between the business capability world and IT world. And the service portfolios help the IT world to decide on their organization, how to shape it. Because if you want to, I don't know, develop new technologies, probably you will be building a different department, which is offering different set of services. And you are not operating on every offering, every service. Then, the services itself, they also have their offerings. Because you can do things in many, many ways. Like David was mentioning the capability model where you have, okay, warehouse management on a global level, but you can do it differently in Asia or maybe in Africa or maybe differently in Poland and Germany. Then it will also justify why you have different services, why you have different service offerings. Because again, going to the higher level, you can actually group it. You can say, we are doing warehouse management, and we expect from IT, you are providing support to warehouse management. Cool. But then on the detail level, it will be different time zones, different resources somewhere. It will be different products being supported, different life cycle then, and stuff like that. And then we go into the center, the heart, so the systems. And the systems is something that uses multiple CIs, multiple elements, right? But for the normal user, no one sees it. You see a CRM, you see a warehouse management system, you see a financial system, but you are not thinking how many software products behind are there, how many Microsoft products, SAP products, and whatever is being used to build that system. This is, again, one of these logical layers. And that's where most of the services, most of the operations will be focusing on, right? You need some kind of a middle element. And usually these systems is the easiest one, because everyone knows, okay, we have an SAP ERP somewhere. Fair enough. These systems refer to software products, and why we have a direct connection to the business capability, software product, and the system. And this triangle of refers to system to the business capability as well. Because the systems are the implementations. Even though they feel like we are on a tactical level because it's something bigger, this is actually an implementation of some kind of a product. More tactical decision, more important decision happens here between the capability and which software or hardware we have chosen to go with, because that's not something that will change day to day. If you have signed an agreement for 7 years of using some kind of a product, you won't be changing so often, right? You will probably wait until this contract ends before you implement something new. So you can still change the systems in between, but you will be using the product that is fulfilling the technical requirements. Of course, we have dependencies too. This is also the dependency management thing we were mentioning here along the way, and we'll be discussing later on as well, because this gives you the perspective of, okay, can we actually, if we go for consolidation or something, how many of these elements we can remove, reduce, change, or what will happen if we will do it. And then the software products, the systems, the individual installations. That's exactly if you want to change. If, for example, let's take the security perspective. We do not agree to have a version 5 because there is version 6. Okay. But then you can exactly say, okay, how many systems is using version 5? So that's your scope, that's your impact. And then refer it and say, okay, but the version 5 actually has some requirements or fulfilling some requirements for Africa, let's say, which cannot be changed because the business is not catching up there. They need to stay there. So still you can mitigate, still you can manage without doing the drastic actions that can impair the business itself. And then we have all the rest, you could say. So the infrastructure CIs, the dynamic CI groups, or the technical service offerings, it's a little bit simplified here, but still you have this relation of depends on, runs on. So basically, if this element breaks, then basically the system doesn't work. This means the service is not working. This means the SLA is impacted. So our client, even though they don't care, they don't see which server it was, for them, the service is not being delivered. And this can seem obvious if we talk like that, but then if you add all the elements of the IT processes, and on one end you will have a freight forwarder sitting somewhere in the office saying, well, the system is not working, and on the other hand, an agent, service desk agent who was here for a week and just is using procedures, how, without all these connections, they will identify what is wrong and inform the correct IT team. So this was the example on the high level. Now we have 3 more practical ones. So what we were actually using and which elements of that, because not always you need to look into all of that, right? First, let's take the system consolidation. That's what also David was mentioning from the capability perspective, how to do this on a more strategic perspective. And here the goal is to provide visibility, provide intake for system consolidation program, to standardize, reduce complexity, rationalize resources. Because if you have portfolio of 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 systems, it's very natural for any human to say, well, we have too many. But the question is, if you actually have too many of those systems, too many of these products, because maybe you have so much of a big and fragmented business that it makes sense. Because if you go into the local regulations, this is often, very often, tons and tons of local systems developed by government agencies, and you have nothing to say about it if you want to do the business there. So what tools from this model, which is part of these objects, you could use, we've been using to actually make the decisions, like move it forward to decide, okay, should we remove, should we migrate, should we leave it as it is? First, the measuring sticks, so the functional requirements, understanding what is the expectation of the business in that area when it comes to a product that fulfills it. Because then you have this technical part, if you recall from the playfield, right? The technical part saying, okay, you cannot go over that one, because if we cannot send emails, then it's useless for us. Then the ownership part, where it's placed, okay, with whom I talk about it. Because if someone says with that department, usually the responsibility is just going away somewhere. The time, so the tolerate, invest, migrate, eliminate tool. You might know it already, but in short, this is a way of actually showing for the systems, for the objects, it can be for the system capability, software, whatever, what is the direction for that? Very simple message. We can also send it to, you know, an IT operational guy, but the same message we can send to the CEO, and they will understand this is the number of the tolerate systems. And that's the reasons why we have them, right, from the list. Nothing to be done here. If we went from 2,000 systems to 1,000 systems, all of them are tolerate or invest, nothing can be done anymore. You can only maybe squish the value inside the systems itself, but you won't consolidate anything further. The relations between them, because they also often justify what is the scope of what you want to do. If you want to say, I want to kill that system, I want to consolidate that area, I also need to understand what is the impact of that change. Because if there are multiple integrations, if there is a lot of relations to clients, then basically the scope creep begins. And the last one is exactly connecting the 3 elements from this playing field slide. So the strategic, something which is obvious to everyone, right? Then the technical, so what we have gathered in the measuring sticks, usually what is missing in many of the processes, especially in the demand management process, gathering the requirements. And the last one, which is again one of the obvious ones, but it's very hard to actually do it properly because there are a lot of assumptions. If you are building business cases, if you have built business cases, you know how often it can be that, okay, we'll say 1,000 hours multiplied by average rate inside the company, right? Is it close to reality? Probably not. But this is also the way of deciding, for example, on this consolidation part, because if on strategic layer we say SAP ERP is everywhere in the world to be used for invoicing. We don't care about the cost. We don't care if it matches the requirements there or not because we know that it matches. Then that's where your decision is ended, right? We just do it. Then we actually verify the technical part, so the fact-based decision. It might be impossible to do the business or to fulfill something if we are not using it. And only if you cannot solve the problem here, then you go into the business case part, where the business says, okay, we actually need to know how much it will cost because these two, they are not persuading us at all. Another part is actually something very operational, so the software whitelisting. This connects well with the security world, and during the break, we were actually discussing shortly about the security guys coming from banking environments, for example, where it's very closed, you cannot introduce anything new and stuff like that. And it's very tempting, right? Let's build this kind of environment, nothing can be done. But then if you want to leave the freedom to the business, to the users, to be innovative, to build stuff, and it doesn't have to mean that someone will figure out the next Google or Facebook in the company, but they will, for example, figure out the better tool for something. Then you will have a hard time if you don't have a very, very good process for whitelisting. Because the moment you push the button of only the things that are on the whitelist can be installed, you are not dealing with one colleague or two colleagues that are sitting next to you and they will explain to you what is the problem over the coffee and you will add the software to the list. You are usually multiplying it by 1,000, 2,000 requests a year. And now let's evaluate that, right? It's not then one person working on it, it's like 10 people working on it, 20 people working on it. You start to look into multiple layers, security, architecture, economical value, the compliance and stuff like that. So this again can help. This is a very operational part. We again have the functional requirements. We know the ownership, so we can, for example, use it for screen testing. If we don't have the owner, we cannot find the owner, then ending all of that paths, let's say, then we can say, okay, then we'll just remove all that stuff and let's wait if someone screams. Why it is crucial to also do this kind of process for screen testing and stuff like that? Because in the end, a good portion of whatever we have in our lives, in our companies and stuff like that, it's really not needed. It seems like it's needed, right? But often you can find out that you remove something from someone's laptop and they will not even notice. But if you will ask them if they need it, of course they need it. And the same, we have the time and the relations, because then all these layers combined, they actually help you to figure out, to cut this huge elephant. Let's use this comparison along the way, to cut it into smaller pieces. Because if you say we have 10,000, 20,000 unique software products, it will be a long process. But you can speed it up by saying, okay, these software products are belonging to this system, so automatically I can use that guy to manage 20 of that products, let's say. And the last example is the SLA framework. So again, we jump on a higher level, on more strategic part. So how you actually negotiate between the IT organization and the business organization. And as you can see, there is a little bit more of the elements already in play. But this is because we take the two strategic parts, so the capabilities from the business and services from IT. So how we are going to actually, what we are going to offer, what we are going to solve on that layer, and then go deeper into what actually we provide, right? So the systems in that case, the infrastructure, what we are providing as the organization. Because if someone in the requirements, in the business capabilities say, I want 5 nines of SLA on my system. And it means everything, right? It means that you need to have network 5 nines, storage 5 nines. This, for those that don't know, it's 99.999% of availability. And you need it also for the support itself. This basically means you cannot have, or you cannot not have 24/7 organization on the IT part and on the support part, because during the year, I will be probably a little bit off, but you have more or less 3-5 seconds, if I recall, during the year of downtime approved in 5 nines, right? Then it's also very important to understand, okay, but when do you need that downtime to not happen? Because it might be that actually the business only cares, I don't know, for Christmas period, right? And for the rest, as long as it works 9 to 5, it's fine. Outside, if it's down, But then it's not 5 seconds that you have during the year, but you can actually make changes or have interruptions hundreds of hours during the year, and no one will scream, and it will be fine. But otherwise, if you cannot figure this out, and you will have a very hard time to figure this out without all these relations and understanding them, because if someone says 5 nines and say, of course, then how are you going to figure out what is missing, or if everyone is actually delivering it? That's why the tools mainly here are the relations, ownership, and non-functional requirements. So what is expected from us, not if my system can send an email or make an invoice, but actually can it be built, for example, for a high availability setup. So where to start with all of that stuff? Answering a little bit of questions in the beginning, so broadening up this perspective. Do we have repositories that actually describe it? Because a lot of cases will say, of course we have processes, everyone has processes. But if you have 300 processes out there, do you have them in one repository, described in one way, that enables you to say, in 300 processes, we have our director involved in 100 of them, let's say. The same goes for services and capabilities, and any other element. That's actually where Volvo is very good at. They actually document a lot of stuff. The second part, if existing repositories are connected, so there are relations, there is logic behind them. I had a pleasure talking recently with one of the companies where the guy said, yes, we have all of that. And then, okay, but are they connected? No. So that's our problem. We cannot utilize that stuff because we know very well what is happening in software. There is actually a service organization, but there is no connection at all between us, right? Then, do we have a demand management process? And this is a very nice process because everyone knows it exists. Everyone is using it. Rarely anyone wants to make it because it always works out, right? Someone will scream more like a C-level guy. Someone will just have more influence power and they will just come in and say, but I want that, right? They won't have the full perspective. That's where the demand management process is, where the analytic is sitting together with you and listening to your requirements. Like using this example of this event here. I said, I want to have presentations here. I want to have a streaming. What do I need? Right? Because I have no clue. The guys have tons of technical stuff out there to make it work. I don't have it at home, so. And that's where the fun begins. That's where the strategic decisions are often taken. And the next question is, am I part of that process? If I'm in asset management, if I'm in security, I'm in architecture, or is it only the architecture part, having the playfield? And as I have heard, like in the EU structures from the previous event, everything goes from top down, right? There is no, does it make sense? No, the architects have decided that's how we're going to implement it, for example. And the next could be, does it utilize these capabilities to support decisions? So does it utilize a standardized set of functionalities by someone, or non-functional requirements, by someone from the business who knows what they want to achieve? And the fourth part is, okay, what is actually important for the company? Because in a lot of cases, someone can say, you know what? We have deep pockets. We are a pharma company who is making billions. We don't care about savings. We care about compliance and security. And that's it. Often, just to ring a bell, you can hear it in the Middle East area, right? Where the countries, the companies, they are using a lot of money from the oil fields and stuff like that. They don't care. They just say, I want the best. And that's it. And that's the requirement. Then you are not bounded by the economical or technical restrictions. The only thing might be a legal restriction, but in that area, sometimes maybe even not that. It's just what actually is important. If you have a company with a low margin business, of course, any cost consolidation reduction will be helping for that. But again, might be areas which don't care again because the legal or compliance. So, example of how this maturity could be built up. Of course, it can depend company to company because everyone is at some point somewhere. The easiest, usually, you start with the discovery of software, hardware, because these ideas are very common. These ideas are easily translated to different layers, the strategic, tactical, operational. It's very mature out there on the market, right? We have discipline, knowledge, everyone at least heard of that. Once you will have that, then you start asking questions, okay, so what exact systems we have? Because if you start asking questions, what systems we have, oh, wow, probably you even will hear like 5 names for the very same setup, right? And someone will be naming it ABI, and the second guy will be saying, no, it's the full name, it's application boundary, blah, 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 and stuff like that. And then you will start figuring, but guys, you are talking about the very same thing, so it's the one system, right? Which is then working with the rest. Then adding the capabilities and just taking it from the organization perspective, IT organization perspective, the last one would be services in my world, but it doesn't have to be like that. But why the capabilities first? Because that's where the requirements come in. If you want to make an optimal organization, IT organization, the most reasonable stuff is the first question to ask, dear client, what do you need? Before going out to them with the whole offer of services and saying, that's what we'll be providing to you. Because maybe they don't need it at all. And just as a wrap-up, first thought that I would like to leave with you is look further. Like, try to find connections, next step, between you, different parts of the organization, the strategy of the business. It might seem like, okay, but I'm sitting and doing incidents in service desk. Why should I care? But if you understand why you are doing the incident management, why it is important to do this fast or slow, or it doesn't matter how fast you are doing it, then you are starting to make the right connection, because if someone comes in and says, I want to change that, you are already prepared for what or how to solve that. Then define where you are today. So usually it's a very good idea to implement something new, but actually it's good to stop for a moment and ask, okay, how much of that stuff we have? What do we want to actually do, right? Because it can be a great idea, but then if you look at what you have, and I can give you an example from real life. Years ago, we sat down with many companies, with advisory companies, and said, let's introduce whitelisting. It's next step of security. And after a couple of meetings, talking with different companies, we actually said, well, the money is a lot better spent in different areas. This whitelisting part, it can wait. It can wait a long time. We are actually not so good in different parts, right? It will bring a lot more benefit. But if we wouldn't stop, we wouldn't actually look where we are today, then probably we would be struggling for many years to do this, even though it wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't bring value at that time. And the last but not least is take initiative. So what also Damian was mentioning earlier, don't wait for others. Like, if it's not taken by anyone, you can make it your own. You can make decisions. And this is very true on the people level, because if someone needs to face your idea, they have a lot more mental work to do than if you are working with someone's idea, right? So, do you have any questions? Yeah, you are fast.
I just used the opportunity to grab the mic to ask you a question.
Yes.
I'm just wondering regarding the business capability model and the assessment of potential new solutions like software or hardware. What do you think about doing the assessment from the technology perspective too? Because we were having multiple examples where we were looking only at the functionality, but the exact technology that we can use for a specific area was kind of impacting the decision. And that was something that I was kind of lacking in all of this overview. So what do you think about it?
Basically, if we refer to a technology, and because all the solutions that we buy, it's also technology. So I think that you are referring to, like, from architecture perspective, if someone says, we are using Java, we are not using .NET, like that, okay. So this is part of this strategic boundary, because this is something that you cannot evaluate every time and every request, because it doesn't make sense. If someone made a decision, we are investing in Microsoft, in Windows solutions, not in Linux solutions, then it's already done. Basically, then already any solution running only on Linux is downgraded in the review process. So this is part of this strategy. So the high-level policies and standards and strategies of what we want to achieve. And this can be on various levels. We can also say, all the technology coming from X, we are not going to work with that.
Any other questions? I can pass the mic then.
No.
And what would you do differently, judging your experience so far?
Differently. If I would have like the full possibility of what, start with the capability part. So just sit down. Of course, the problem is that you are, if we are talking from an IT perspective, you are on lower position in the discussion, in the negotiations, because as in our real life, if an IT provider comes to you, your internet provider, and they will ask you, man, we have a great idea, right? If you will work with us for the next couple of months and help us structure the services that we have, you will have a lot better service. What you usually do, you say, I don't have time, cheers. Because that's life, right? You have purchased a service which you are fine about, it works. Why improve something that is working? And the same approach is, but on a bigger scale, from the business perspective. It works, so why do you want to improve it? Using my energy, right? If you can do it on yourself, awesome. But of course, building the requirements requires a client on the other side, a client that wants to describe what they actually need and who wants to answer the nasty questions, because then you ask them, they say, I really need a blue cup. And you say, okay, but a red one is cool. No, it must be blue. Why blue? I have no idea, but it must be blue, right? But then you say, but we don't have the blue paint and whatever, right? But why it cannot be red? Because. Okay, right? And you are drilling these questions, you are doing it. So always I would start with the first one. What are the requirements? And then build on top of that. Of course, that's the ideal word. Usually I need to juggle and balance out in between. Anything else? If not,